Alright, our next case study is a 1966 Hagstrom 2 guitar. As you can see, it's not in great shape, but we are going to go through this whole thing. We're going to probably rewire it, detail it, polish the frets. There's a tuning knob missing and everything else. So just as an introduction, it's very old. It's probably one of the older guitars I've ever worked on, and it's a really disgustingly gross, sitting around the basement for 25-30 years. So we'll get going on it. I got all the replacement parts. I got the switches, I got the potentiometer, and we're hoping that the pickups still work, but we're going to go and clean and polish up all the hardware and put brand new electronics in it. So we'll get going next by doing some fret work, and we'll show you the results of the tuners getting put on, and I'll show you how to tape off the neck. Okay, we did a hand polish of the guitar. Of course, it took a couple of rags and a little bit of doing, but it turned out pretty good. If we were going to do a complete or full restoration, we would probably take these parts off, buff them, but we're not going to take it to that route. We want to kind of keep it era correct, and if there's a little bit of corrosion, we're going to keep it. The fretboard, on the other hand, did need a lot of help. My first thought was going to be to tape it off and fret level recrown it and then polish them, but the neck's pretty straight and it's in really good shape. So just to freshen this up, we took 4/0 steel wool. I do not recommend this unless you've tried it a couple of times on really old or crappy guitars, but bottom line is it cleaned the fretboard up really good, got all the dirt off, and polished the fret wire really well. And also we've got the tuner that was missing. We replaced that and then detailed the headstock really well. Looking at the back of this, we got a lot of lacquer missing. Basically, we're just going to clean this up. We were thinking about maybe sanding it down raw, but we want to keep this as original as possible, but we want to get it up and running. So our next step is going to be to remove the pick guard and start looking at the electronics. Now, when I plug this in, it doesn't work at all. We're hoping that the pickups work, and the main goal is to replace the potentiometer with a 250K, replace all the slider switches. I got all these through StewMac. They're fairly inexpensive components. To redo this guitar really isn't going to cost much. Maybe we'll get into that later. And then some of the bridge pieces, while we're doing all the wiring, I'm going to just soak this in either gun oil or AMS oil. That should loosen up all the rusted components so that when we go to intonate and set up, we shouldn't have any issues. So next shot, I think I'll show you either the reassembly or part of the wiring as we do that. So here we go. Alright, so we disassembled the pickguard assembly here off the guitar, and instantly we found out that the potentiometer isn't hooked up, the 1/4" jack isn't hooked up, but we don't care about any of that because we're going to be pulling all that out and replacing it with new components that are era correct. And what we want to do is just make sure that the two pickups are functioning. Now, I'm on ohms, which as you know in other courses, and if you've watched any of my other videos, it just does resistance. So what we need to do is follow the wires out of the pickups and make sure that they're working. So this red is the ground, so I can just touch right here. And I follow this blue wire over and touch right here. And as you can see, we're pulling 6.62 ohms. That pickup is functional. It'll work. Now, that means when we replace all this stuff, we're luckily going to have a fully functional Hagstrom 2. So I'm going to ground on here and then follow the blue wire over. And we're pulling 8.63 ohms. So both of the pickups work. We're in great shape. What we're actually going to do, and I'll do this off camera, is I'm going to pull all the switches. I'm going to pull the potentiometer off. I'm going to pull a 1/4" jack. I'm just going to start replacing this stuff. And then we're actually going to take out the resistor that comes with it stock and the capacitor that comes out stock. And we're going to reuse those components because I don't have them here on hand, and we want to keep this as stock as possible and functional. So on the next scene, we will have all these components completely replaced with new, and we'll start wiring them in. Alright, we've got all the old components out of that Hagstrom 2. They are really beat. I mean, they definitely needed to be replaced. So what we're looking at now is all brand new components. In the last shot we tested the pickups and everything, so we know those work. We cleaned everything up, and I do have to warn you, when it comes to new switches, new potentiometers, stuff like that, you got to be willing to take a little bit of extra time. Some of the screws were a lot smaller. Some of the screws for like these pieces were really small, so we kind of had to re-drill some holes and relocate some things. And of course we cleaned everything while it was disassembled. So I want to give you a before picture, and I also want to say that I went online and I got just a quick wiring diagram that shows us how this was originally wired so that we can put it back to stock. So we're going to use this, and we're also going to be using the original components, the capacitor and the resistor that came out of the guitar. That way it shouldn't change any of the tones or any of the characteristics that the guitar had originally. So I want you to take a good look at this, because the next time you see it, it's going to be completely wired up. And here we go. Alright, as promised, we've got all the new components on here, and we went and rewired everything, and I hope you can see this. It turned out fabulous. We went back to the original wiring, and we used as close to original components as possible, and we also reused the capacitor and resistor. Pickups are working, everything's working. We tested it with a meter, and then we also hooked up the new 1/4 inch jack, and these wires are hanging along with the ground to the bridge. So the next time you see this, we're going to have the pick guard back on it. We're going to have all this just soldered together. I just thought it'd be easier to show you what was happening here without those connected. So we are wired for sound on this guitar. The neck looks great. The tuners are working. We're going to put this down, and then I think what we're going to have to do is clean the bridge up, get ready for intonation and setup, and get some strings on it. So we'll finish these connections up, button it up, and be right back. So we're all strung up. Bridge design is pretty iffy, I gotta say. We had a little issues with this thing. All you gotta do is bump the E and it comes out. So I think we'll probably groove that out a little bit and you know, get that to stay in a little bit better. Obviously the bar is missing on the tremolo and everything, but we've got a fully functional guitar, which we didn't have before, and it is playable. We were able to drop the action down and get sound out of it. So let me unplug this and give you a quick rundown. Remember what we had. And remember, this is 1966 Hagstrom 2, which is 2 pickup. We'll cut those off, obviously, but we're just coming to the end of the project. And as stock as we could make it and get it up and running, there is your restoration of a Hagstrom 2 from 1966.